Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Satire and Serial Killers, where we use satirical humor to make talking about serial killers less sad. So, I'm your host, Jordan, and today we are going to be looking at a really interesting case, actually. It's really messy. It is the case of Cary Stayner, or more infamously known as the Yosemite Killer. Not because he was, had a thing for logging or being in the logging industry and cutting down on this wildlife or, had like a hunting thing for animals. He just more had like a hunting thing for humans instead. So, I mean, he kind of did have a hunting thing, but either way. So, Cary Stayner was born on August 13th, 1961, making him a Leo, therefore a fire sign, so therefore very, kind of just that's how fire signs are. Stayner, in his childhood, was reportedly sexually assaulted by his uncle. So, he just very terrible, very terrible. And then, also during his childhood, he also suffered the trauma of his younger brother Stephen's kidnapping. So he just never really had like a good upbringing. He was kind of like all over the place. I mean, it really sucked. Side note into Stephen Stayner as well. Stephen Stayner was kidnapped while he was walking home from school. In Merced, California, which is where the family is from. And Stephen was 7 at the time and was unfortunately kidnapped by a child molester named Kenneth Parnell. So, Stephen escaped 7 years later and then died tragically in a motorcycle accident in 1989. So, really, the Stayners never got a break. Like, there was always some form of trauma that was going to happen. I mean, at least with Cary Stayner, oh, you're going to get sexually assaulted by your uncle. Everything's going to be fine. Oh, wait, never mind. Your brother's going to get kidnapped, and then he's going to reappear in your life 7 years later, and you're going to be like, oh my god. But, regardless of that, before Stephen had come back home, Cary Stayner was exhibiting a lot of signs of an obsessive-compulsive disorder, as he would very often pull his own hair out, so he would be wearing a lot of hats and everything, but regardless of that, he was made fun of a lot in school, because a lot of people just made fun of him, like, oh my god, you're prematurely balding, even though he was just ripping his hair out, but whatever. Stayner also had a really hard time with women, so he was having a really hard time with making connections with women and being able to talk to them because, I don't know, he was maybe just, nervous or whatever. Or he was probably thinking about killing them and keeping them in his basement because he had been having, violent fantasies about these women from the age of, 7. So, I mean, kind of early to the game, but... So, good job in that aspect. He was really early to the game for that. Stayner, throughout his entire life, had virtually no criminal background before the murders, other than low-level drug charges for marijuana. So basically, this will show up later in the case as well, but, later in life, Cary had started working as a handyman for the Cedar Creek Lodge in the town of El Portal near Yosemite in 1997, so quite a while after Stephen Stayner had passed away, and also quite a while after his uncle had passed away. His uncle had reportedly died through a home break-in, even though I'm not gonna imply that, Cary Stayner probably killed his uncle, but, if the shoe fits, you gotta wear it. So, around the time that Cary was working as a handyman in Cedar Lodge, he started up a relationship with a waitress that was also at Cedar Lodge. While we don't know the actual waitress's name, we do know one of her daughter's names, who is Lena, who was about 10 to 11 when her mother began a relationship with Cary Stayner. So, Lena and her sister both remember Stayner being very kind, which, he kind of had that very false sense of security personality about him in a way, but he often drew illustrations for them, brought them Beanie Babies whenever he saw them, taught them how to dive, etc., etc., So, but, minus all the good and happy about Cary Stayner, suddenly, there were other happenings going on in the Yosemite Park, which, other than love, which were, disappearances. So, on February 15th of 1999, Carol Sund, Julie Sund, and Silvina Peloso went missing as they were staying at the Cedar Lodge Motel to look at colleges and to see Yosemite. So, obviously, no one knew where they went, so they started doing, this huge, full-out search, And then, in March of 1999, Carol Sund and Silvina Peloso's charred remains were found in the trunk of their rental vehicle about 2 hours away from the Cedar Lodge. So, obviously there was some foul play involved. Like, you don't just die and then somehow spontaneously combust in the back of your own vehicle. That's just not how the world works, unfortunately. So, now the one main question that everyone was asking is obviously, where is Julie? Where's she at? Okay, they found her on March 29th, not alive, about an hour away from the rental car where Silvina and Carol were found. Before they had found her, though, they'd actually received an anonymous letter with a really kind of creepy drawing showing the location of Sund's body with a note saying, "We had fun with this one." So, really, really, really messed up with this individual, like just a full dick move. So, police had interviewed Stayner, but had let him go because he was found to be extremely helpful, just like, Lena, his girlfriend's daughter, had said, along with having no violent tendencies or prior convictions. I mean, he only had the small marijuana charges, so it's not like he was really gonna be under fire there. So, because of this, the police redirected their attention to other employees at the Cedar Lodge and unsuspicious people in the town of Modesto, where Carol Sund's wallet was found after she'd been missing for 3 days. So the police had no leads. They were looking around. They were kind of checking things out. Then, on July 22nd of 1999, Joy Armstrong's decapitated body was found in the river near her cabin in Yosemite. So obviously they were like, okay, serial killer's still here. We gotta look around and whatever. So Stayner and his vehicle were searched again because they were like, yo, you're an employee here. You were working at this time. What's going on? But law enforcement still let him go because they didn't really see anything in his car or, anything like that. However, literally right after they let him go, like I shit you not, right after they let him go, the FBI heard from an eyewitness that they had seen Stayner's pale blue 1972 International Scout right outside of Armstrong's home around the same time as the murder. So the FBI whipped their ass around. They're like, okay, never mind. This is 100% our dude. Like, he knows something, So on July 24th of 1999, Stayner was apprehended in Wilton, California at the Laguna del Sol nudist camp. The only reason that they found him, too, is because, which I think is kind of comical, is that they were like, oh, yeah, come and look for Stayner. And they were like, well, where is he? Like, how are we supposed to tell who he is? And they're like, oh, he's the only one wearing clothes. So, kind of funny, kind of humorous. But, so they had later taken Stayner back to, the department and were asking him questions. And actually, the FBI agent Jeff Reineck that had picked Stayner up and had been driving him back to the department was actually having a really, really good conversation with him. I mean, they were talking a lot about, Stayner's childhood, and Stayner was opening up to him. So Reineck really thought that he had a really good relationship with Stayner. But that would prove not to be true, because while they were having pizza, actually, the FBI agents and Stayner, Stayner fully just kind of dropped the bombshell and was like, I know stuff about these killings, but I will only tell you about the killings if you give me a pretty decent amount of child pornography. And all of them were like, yo, dude, no, we're not going to do that. And Stayner was like, okay, I'll just tell you anyway, so I don't know, probably just like a form of a scare tactic or whatever. But anyway, so Cary had told them before he even went into, like, what was going on, is that he knew that he was going to be on death row before he even went to trial, before he even said what he was going about how he had killed these women. But he wanted to go so that he could be on death row with a clear conscience, essentially. So, later that day, Stayner had admitted to Agent Jeff Reineck that he had killed all 4 women. So, Carol Sund, Julie Sund, Silvina Peloso, and Julie Armstrong. Or Jody Armstrong, sorry, my bad. No, sorry, goodness, Joy Armstrong. So, Stayner was then convicted on all charges on August 27, 2002, and he's currently in death row in San Quentin State Prison in California. So after this, law enforcement had then informed Lena, which is how she comes back into the story. You guys remember Stayner's girlfriend from Cedar Lodge? So the FBI had come back into, or his girlfriend and her family had come back into the equation because law enforcement had then informed, the family that Stayner had been convicted of the 4 murders in Yosemite, but that her family had also been a target of Stayner, which Stayner had tried to murder on 3 separate occasions, which I don't know how you can attempt to murder someone on 3 separate occasions without actually doing it, but, maybe he chickened out. So, overall, though, Stayner's psychiatrist is not 100% convinced that, Steven Stayner's childhood and Cary Stayner's childhood, the combination of the two, and the trauma from Steven being kidnapped and molested and sexually assaulted his entire life, and Cary potentially being sexually assaulted his entire life, led Cary to murder. It seemed like Cary always had these ideas going on in his head, and unfortunately, it's very obvious that he did too. I mean, the way that he killed his victims, he didn't just kill them through, a gunshot, which even though is a terrible way to kill someone, you should never kill someone. Just know that I'm not saying that you should kill someone. But overall, he would kill them by either strangulation or stabbing them, or, even with, Joy Armstrong, for example, he literally cut off her head and put her in the river. Why would you do that? But, it shows the same sort of level of, sexual deviancy that would have probably been, present in Kenneth Parnell, who was Steven Stayner's kidnapper. So it's kind of it obviously didn't have anything to do with Steven and, his anger at the man that had taken Steven. It was more of his own issues within himself. So his violent tendencies towards women and all those kinds of things. So that's kind of the background on Cary Stayner. That's kind of, where he was to how he is now. Even though nobody really knows how he is now, I don't think anybody really cares. I mean, he's on death row in San Quentin, California. What else do you need to know? But that's just kind of him as of today's date. So next week we are going to be looking more into why he did what he did, so more kind of doing a psychological deep delve into his mind and the processes that he must have been going through. We're going to be having a couple people on to talk about their own things, some expertise level stuff, and yeah, so we're also going to be exploring the geographical location of Yosemite and why it seems like that is such a magnet for crime, because there's a lot of crime that happens in Yosemite and a lot of crimes that happens in national parks. So either way, we're going to be looking at those, and we will have a lot of fun when we do that. So, all right, I hope that you guys enjoyed everything that there is about Cary Stayner. Take a look at some of the articles that I had looked at to find some of this information. I mean, I was looking at things from A&E, from, there's an episode on 2020 about him called Evil in Eden, which is really interesting because it's about, Stayner and his brother Steven. So there's that. There's one on heavy.com. There's a couple more, even just going to Stayner's Wikipedia page, you'll find so much information on him. It's insane. But, that's just because he's a national person. So, I mean, an infamous person, but, he's still people are still very much interested in him. So, anyway, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Continue to laugh while you look at anything about Stayner, because just lighten up the mood a little bit, So, I will catch you guys next week. Adios.